Hello, my name is Hakon and welcome back to another little video on my channel where today I'm going to be talking about this. This is the Soundcraft EPM6 audio mixer, and this is the one I bought earlier this year when I needed a mixer for the very first time. Now, needing a mixer for the first time can be quite daunting because, well, you don't know anything about mixers usually, and you don't know what you need, you don't know what you're looking for, you're not sure how many channels you need, what kind of auxiliary sends or returns you need, and you have to start thinking about all these things and all the while not really knowing how it works to start with. So, I'm rather glad I went with this one because this ticks all my boxes that I realized after a while that I had. I did look at lots of different ones, and this has some features that actually make it stand head and shoulders above the rest of the small mixers I looked at. And when I say small mixer, of course, this is not a tiny mixer. It is actually rather big, but for something that's meant to be in one place, you could still drag it along to a gig, of course. There are smaller sort of gig-friendly size mixers, but this is still compact and light enough to bring along if you needed to. Now, one thing I noticed when I was looking at small mixers is that most of the ones with fewer than 10 channels only have one auxiliary output, one effect send. So one mono effect send. Of course, the auxiliary doesn't have to be an effect send, but that is quite a common way to use it, is as an effect send. Another thing I noticed with small mixers in general is that most of them do not have a dedicated return for the auxiliary output. That means that you have to use channels on your mixer for the return signal from your effects. And so a 6-channel mixer suddenly becomes a 4-channel, and that can be quite limiting. But this one, on the other hand, Soundcraft, they do it a bit differently. This is the Soundcraft EPM6, which means 6-channel mixer, of course. They also have I believe a 10 and a 16 or something like that, or a 12 and a 16. I can't remember the exact numbers. It's basically exactly the same, but with more of these primary channels here. What Soundcraft does is they call this a 6-channel mixer, but technically it's got a lot more than 6 channels, whereas other makers, they might just tote up all the channels that give outputs and call it that many channels mixer, and which can be a little bit, or that many inputs, sorry, not outputs. So in this case, you actually have a lot more than 6 channels, because you have 6 primary channels, and then you have 2 stereo channels here, which can be used for the auxiliary returns, but you don't have to. You can use it for anything. So that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 channels. And then it also has a 2-track input, which is intended to be from a playback device, which of course is so you can monitor so if you send out your signal to a recorder, you can take the monitor output from your recorder and put it back in and use that to monitor it. That's the main purpose of it, but it doesn't stop you from using it for anything else, which means that you now have 2 additional tracks input as well. So in effect, this is a 12-track mixer, actually, in the terminology that many other mixer makers use. So let's just start and have a little look at the basics here. So we have 6 main mono input channels, each with an XLR, balanced XLR input, of course, and phantom power, as you can see here, is just one button, which means that phantom power is either on for all the channels or off for all the channels. This shouldn't be a problem because most microphones, and when I say most, I mean sort of certainly modern day ones, they would be wired in a certain way. That means if they don't need phantom power and phantom power is on, it will not damage the microphone. But if you are using vintage ribbon mics, particularly, you have to be a bit wary of this, because putting on phantom power when it doesn't need it could actually destroy the microphone and also create a short circuit in the way the voltage is moved through the mixture as well, and it could actually damage other circuitry. So one has to be a bit wary about that. Make sure that your microphones are wired the correct way if you are in doubt. Most new ones shouldn't be a problem at all. And then, of course, if you don't use the XLR inputs, you can use the line inputs here, and these are all, well, I wouldn't call them stereo jacks because they are TRS jacks, which means you can use them for balanced input as well. You don't have to use a mono jack like this, a mono plug. You can use these, of course, but these are unbalanced. So if you have a correctly wired TRS plug from a mono source, you get the plus signal and the minus signal and then the ground, and that means it's a balanced signal and you are potentially getting less noise. So you have that option. You can either have a unbalanced or a balanced input into what is a balanced socket. And I'm not sure entirely now, but I think maybe using the line will override the mic input, or certainly you shouldn't use them at the same time. Each of these channels also have an insert, and by an insert that means this is, again, it's a TRS socket, but what it does is on the tip of the plug it sends the signal out, on the ring it sends it back, and this breaks the signal chain so that all the signal goes out and all the signal comes back here via whatever you plug into it. So this could be an effect processor, for instance. Doesn't have to be, but it could be. And also this allows you to do another thing which I think is quite interesting. If you are good at tinkering, which you should be if you are doing anything to do with audio engineering, and you make your own plugs, you can short the tip and the ring together. And what that does is, on the plug, and if you do that, you actually get a parallel connection if you put it into the insert. So imagine you put that into the insert there, and instead of that breaking the signal chain, so all the signal has to go out and come back again, it just connects it in parallel. So you can use that to record a single channel before equalizer, before fader, and you can do that for all the channels if you want to record them all. So that's a nice way to actually, if you want to take this into a multi-tracker for mixing in the future as well. So for instance, if you are working live and you're using a mixer for live production, but you also want to record the different instruments and other sound sources and do a remix later in the studio, you can actually take out each single channel from this and do it that way. So that's a really nice option to have, although it does require a little bit of soldering, but it does say in the manual exactly how you can do that. So that's quite a useful thing as well. Now, this is followed by a gain, which goes from 5, whatever that means, to 60 decibels. Surely it doesn't mean 5 decibels. 30, well, maybe it is. So up to 60 decibels of gain. It seems rather clean. Of course, one good thing about this is that it's all analog, so there's no digital amplification or circuitry that can create ugly noise. If you have any noise associated with cranking it up, it's analog noise, and as we know, that is quite pleasant. I'm not going to say anything about gain staging in this video because, well, partly also because I don't know much about it, but also yeah, well, mostly because I don't know anything about it. Right, so then we have the equalizer section, and this is quite a good one as well, I think. So we have the high frequency first, So it's got a center detent here, and it goes down to 15 decibels of attenuation or up to 15 decibels of amplification. And it is set to do that for frequencies over 12 kilohertz. So once you get to 12 kilohertz, and there's a bit of a sort of a shoulder as well to the signal, so it's quite a nice sort of slopey one, you start amplifying the frequencies above or attenuating the frequencies above. I'm going to skip the middle one for now and talk about the low frequency one, which works exactly the same way. So that it has a cutoff point of 60 hertz. So anything below 60 with a shoulder will be attenuated up to 15 or amplified up to 15 decibels. Now the middle frequency one is really nice because you can set where the center point is, all the way from 150 hertz to 3.5 kilohertz. And then you have minus or plus 15 decibels for that frequency. And of course, this is a range where the human ear is most attuned to small differences in timbre and sound quality. And of course, that's where you might need to be really precise with where you want to boost the frequencies to just get that presence, for instance, in a vocal. And also the low and high frequency is good for adjusting for the room, of course. Sometimes a room is a bit too dark and you need to brighten up a little bit and you use the high frequency, or you need to reduce the low frequencies, for instance. Then we have the auxiliary sends, and this is of course really useful to have two rather than just one on such a small mixer. So you got two auxiliary sends. I use them for effects. You can use them for other things too, of course. I mean, there's absolutely no reason why you can't have the auxiliary sends also be an additional monitor output or a recording output. Absolutely not. You could do that if you wanted to. But I think it's, of course, the main intention is to have your effects plugged in here, and you adjust how much you send to each one. And the auxiliary outputs here, they are also balanced mono outputs. So basically all the ones that are, well, everything that can be balanced is balanced on this mixer. Then you have the pan output here, or the pan, not pan output, but pan control, left and right. So if you take it all the way to the left, or the further left you go, the more it starts attenuating the right channel, and in the middle it should be equal. And if you move it right, you attenuate the left channel down to infinite decibels. Then we have two buttons down here, mute, quite self-explanatory, and PFL, post-fader level, and that is for sending the post-fader level signal to the monitor. So it's basically a monitor selection button. Right, so that's exactly the same for all the 6 main channels. And then we have let's do the auxiliary outputs, balanced TRS again. And then we have 2 dedicated returns for the outputs of the auxiliaries, but of course you can use them for absolutely anything. So these are left and right stereo inputs. I believe these are also balanced because they can be. Everything that is balanced is. And they have their own gain knobs here, which is just minus 10 to 20 decibels. So that's an adjustment really for the volume. If you use this for effects, most likely you would have control of the dynamics in the effects processing as well. So you wouldn't need to do much, but a little bit of adjustment maybe here. It's only got a 2-channel equalizer, high frequency and low frequency. It doesn't have the middle frequency boost. But of course, again, this is, of course, usually not necessary. And then, oh, by the way, one more thing. When it comes to sending to the auxiliaries, there is actually a few options as well. You can set each of them to be pre or post fader as well, which is quite useful. So you decide which signal actually gets sent to the auxiliaries. So that's control over here. And one really nice thing is that you also get sends on this channel too, which means if you use it for something else, you get sends to your effects, but you also can feedback as well. So if you use auxiliary 1 here and you do the return here, left and right, and then you can send that signal again to auxiliary 1, which means you can create feedback, which can be used creatively. And then there's a balance knob here at the end. Of course, this is not a pan control because this is a stereo channel, so it's left or right. And then we have post fader level to monitor or mute, and a slider here as well. The sliders, they have a 0 point about here, and then it goes up to 10 and down to minus infinite. I'm not that used to using sliders yet, but I'm getting used to it. I'm more used to using knobs. I find that easier to control actually, but it's a matter of habit, I guess. So, right, so we have those stereo channels there. And again, we have a mute button for each of these as well. Then we have, maybe we should talk about the monitor outputs here. So anything that is selected with the PFL button goes to the monitor output. And the monitor output is also parallel with the headphone output, and the monitor has its own level control, and the headphone volume is also changed when you change the monitor volume, but it also has its own adjustment knob here, which is useful so you don't ruin your ears. So that's quite nice. And of course the monitor can be used as an additional recording source output as well. It doesn't have to be used for monitoring. You can do whatever you like, because you can select everything, of course, and have that sent to the monitor. Then we have, I'll just do it from the top here. So we have the main outputs, XLR balanced, of course. And this also has 2 inserts, just like on the main channels. And again, of course, you can use this as an extra output for the full mix as well by shorting together the tip and the ring of a plug, of a TRS plug on one end, if you want to. Then we have an interesting thing here, which you also don't see on many mixers. Most mixers only have 1 output and that's it. But this one has a 2-track input, which I mentioned earlier. And this is, of course, if you want to connect a backing track, for instance. It could be a normal use case scenario. Or a click track, for instance, that's been pre-recorded. And you would put that in here to... and then you could monitor that with your 2-track controls. And it says, yeah, 2-track, either monitor or to mix. And if you put to mix, that means that whatever comes in here on the 2-track, left and right, is then sent to the main mix. So that becomes part of the mix. You can't adjust how it mixes. Everything has to be done before it gets into the mixer. So you don't have any of the mixer controls for the 2-track, but most likely the 2-track would come from something where you already have control. Then we have a record out, left and right, unbalanced RCA plugs. And of course the reason why you have this 2-track here, one of the main reasons would be to monitor the recording. So you send this to your recording device, your tape machine, for instance, if you use that, which is quite fun to use. And then you take the monitor output from your tape machine and you put it back into the 2-track. And then when you want to listen to the recording to make sure it sounds right, you press the 2-track monitor button down here, and then it overrides the normal monitor output from the mixer, and all you hear is from the 2-track. So now you can just listen just to your recorded track, for instance. Very useful. Headphones, I mentioned those. Own level control in addition to the monitor level control. And of course, you can use it as an additional output for recording if you want to as well. You can record from this from so many places. But of course, that does take the monitor output, not the main mix. important to note. And then I think that is pretty much it, actually. And then you have the main level controls left and right down here. I didn't mention these, I did mention those. That's it, really. So purely analog circuitry, you can push it a little bit, and of course the distortion you get first is that analog kind of distortion that doesn't sound too bad. Otherwise, it seems to be quite transparent in sound. It doesn't color the sound too much. I certainly haven't detected anything, but then again, I haven't input signals into this that were so weak they needed a lot of gain in the mixer. Because when you're working with synthesizers, you tend to run them quite hot from the synth, so very little gain is needed. So I haven't really looked into how it may color the sound once you start amping it up. But these are Class A amplification, I believe. Very good quality, and of course Soundcraft is known for their good quality amps and mixers. And this is a mixer that retails for around £150 at the moment, which I think is a bargain for what you're getting, which is essentially a lot more than just a 6-channel mixer, because you have all these other channels too. So I would say certainly call it a 10-channel mixer, which was quite nice to discover. I didn't actually realize that so much when I was buying it. I didn't think so much about it. I just thought of these as returns. But of course, you can use the stereo channels also for additional equipment if you need to or want to. Built like a tank, nice, solid. Everything feels. I mean, you can wiggle the knobs, you can wiggle the sliders, but it still feels really solid and like it would stand up to regular daily gig use as well. So, did I mention the on the sides here you have the screws easily available, and this is also so you can attach rack cheeks to them, so you get these sort of rack attachments from Soundcraft, I believe, to make it fit into a rack. And also it would be easy if somebody wants to put on wooden end cheeks as well here, which is quite in vogue these days. Power connector is down here, means input, nicely out of the way. There's plenty of room for your plug to stick out. And one thing about this, of course, a smaller mixer tends to have an external power brick. This one has the transformer is inside. I have heard some people say that their mixers get a little bit warm. I haven't experienced any issues with heating. As far as I can tell, even when using this for an hour or two, it's cooler than I would have expected, let's say. So I think that's it for the moment. I hope you found this video useful. This is certainly a mixer I can recommend if you are in the market for your first mixer. I think it's great, and I'm not getting paid to say this, of course. I'm just a happy customer of Soundcraft's who just like their mixer and just thought I'd share it with the world. So if you enjoyed this video, if you found it useful, or if you learned something new, or if it helped you to decide which mixer to buy, or if it certainly helped you to define perhaps for yourself what you're looking for in a mixer if you are in the market for one, then please like, share, comment, subscribe, join me on Patreon, all those things. And I'll be looking forward to seeing you in my future videos, which will be about, well, whatever they're about, because I do so many different things on this channel now. So my apologies, of course, to anyone who's only interested in one thing on this channel. It's quite an eclectic mix. But yes. Thanks for watching, and goodbye for now. Bye-bye.